coach Curley Hallman. Curley, you like that music there?
Oh, yeah, I could listen to all of Otis's stuff all day long.
Hey, Curley, I
Yep.
want you to tell our listeners how bad you think Georgia is.
How bad?
Yeah, they
I
want to
think
hear so.
I think Georgia's getting a lot better. Their young kids are growing up, and so I don't know if the Alabama people are so locked in that that they think that no one's going to give them a good game. But I think Georgia is really improving. They got two quarterbacks that can play. One of them's got a bigger role naturally, and they got running backs that can run, and they look like they're pretty sound in the kicking game. So I think if Alabama comes out in the last three games, they've been kind of a little bit slow starting in the first half, about three games in a row. Then, of course, second half they get to going pretty strong, but they get started off slow against Georgia. And you feed fuel to the fire for Georgia. And, something we talked about real briefly, let me mention this. Barry, last week we were talking about, what is it? Is it the snapper? Is it the holder? Is it the protection? Or is it the kicker? And I got to think about something, the most important thing, and all that stuff. The kickers, the field goal PAT guys, their plant foot is the most important thing. And just like any athlete in any position you play,
How they plant.
You go to golfers and their balance. So I went back and looked at some stuff, and when I used to coach the kickers, I used to make them skip rope, and especially on their plant foot. And that might have been a problem in Alabama early. It looked better this week though, and so but it's your plant foot is the most important thing.
Yeah, I think the plant foot had something to do with his bad kicking on a couple of kicks. I really do. I think that's a very, very good point, Barry.
Yeah. Speaking of kicking game, I hope they get it worked out. But you going back to the plant foot, maybe it's worked out. Alabama has a blocked punt against Auburn. Auburn has a good kickoff return, which resulted in a touchdown for Auburn. Then Alabama, this was shocking to me, but then it wasn't. Going into last week's game, Alabama, their overall punting average was 30 yards, last in the nation. So you put those things in with the game coming up of this magnitude, I hope they get all this stuff worked out. Okay, and if they come out slow, then they may be playing down to the last minute. But Alabama's got better players right now, more of them, because Georgia's got so many that are still young and growing up, but they're pretty talented.
That's a good analogy on both. The kicker for Georgia is so darn good that he can give them three and somewhere around the 40-yard line of Alabama.
Curley, if the committee's job is to get the four best teams in the playoff, that is their job.
That is their number one goal.
All right, so this leads me to this question. If Georgia loses to Alabama, I think Georgia will be in the top four today. They'll be four. If they lose a hard-fought 3-point game to Alabama, aren't they one of the best four? Shouldn't they still? If you're talking about getting the best four, it's just unfortunate they have to play Alabama now instead of the Final Four. Are they not still one of the top four? What would the country do if Georgia lost to Alabama by 3 and the committee made a statement and left them in the Final Four? These people would go crazy.
If they did. I think the total scenario of the thing, it a lot would depend on what Oklahoma does and Ohio State, and if Oklahoma can have a big game against Texas, who Oklahoma lost by 3, then the fact I think they tie in there a little bit too. That little quarterback at Oklahoma, it's still a 2-horse race with one game left to decide the Heisman between Tua and Kyler Murray. I know it teased a lot of the Alabama people off, but I told a guy the other day, I was talking about it. He said, "Heck no, that ain't even close." I said, "Have you seen that kid play from Oklahoma?" And he said, "No, I don't need to." So, but
yeah, exactly.
if Oklahoma has a big game and Ohio State, then and Georgia loses, I think whether they lose in a close game or win, they lose big. One of those other two are going in the top four, I believe.
Yeah, it'll be
Georgia's
interesting to
got
see.
the one loss, and
It is be interesting to see if Alabama won and Oklahoma and Ohio State lost. Would the committee put Central Florida in the Final Four or leave Georgia in there if it was close? Would they put Central Florida in there, you think?
No.
I think if the quarterback was still healthy, boy, what a bad injury. And that kid is an outstanding football player from Central Florida. The census of the general public, people who like underdogs, that's a pretty good story. I'd like to see them put them in, but it's not going to happen. I think they'd leave Georgia in.
Yeah, I'd love for them to put Central Florida at number 4 and let Alabama play Central Florida and just to see what would happen.
The skill guys can play, but with the quarterback, they'll take into consideration that with the quarterback's injury, even though after he got hurt, they still played a decent football team and won pretty big. But it's a good story, and if they keep winning, a lot of people say, well, why don't they play other people? Well, they've tried to get to outside their conference, but they want to schedule some bigger people, but it's got to be a home and home. They're not going to go on the road and make.
Yeah, well, I don't think they can get people to play them. Everybody says, you got to play tougher opponents. Well, I don't think people will play them.
They don't want to play them.
No, so how do they get tougher opponents? Because they're not even going to play them at their place. They're not going to let Central Florida. That's not going to be their money game, and they're not going back to Central Florida. So I don't know how they schedule. It's easy to say, we'll just play a tougher schedule, but it's hard to do, Curley, isn't it? People don't understand how difficult it is to get these people to play you.
Yeah, it's a tough situation for them. They've got them a nice stadium there, and you said, yeah, we'll play people, but it's going to be on a home and home. In other words, let's say they come to Alabama, and next year Alabama's got to go to that place. It's not going to happen.
No.
You've got in Georgia.
Let me ask you before we leave this, because we're talking about the what ifs of this playoff. And Coach, you'll remember this, I promise you. I don't know if it was 73, 4, 5, or 6. And I know I was a young coach at Alabama. Coach Bryant wanted to form, I think it was a 72-team situation, or 72 teams, and pull away from the NCAA. You remember that, Wimp?
Yeah, a little bit.
But that would solve a lot of these problems that a lot of people have right now. But Coach Bryant was way ahead of his time in a lot of things, but he wanted to form a super league. And then the rest of them would fall into their own category, or the next 72 or whatever. But I look back now, and I was thinking about that other night. Coach Bryant, he had a heck of an idea, and it'd be a super league and pull away from the NCAA.
Curley, I wanted to ask you this. I've asked just about everybody we have. Nobody's really could tell me why. Maybe there's not a reason why. In order for Georgia to beat Alabama, you got to hit Tua. I mean, you got to get to him. If you let him stand back there like Auburn did, he is going to pick you apart. But if you hit him like Mississippi State did, then I think he's vulnerable a little bit. When I look at the stats are what they are. Yeah. Georgia's 13th in sacking the quarterback. Now, does Kirby smarten them? Are they going to design a game plan that's going to pressure the quarterback, try to give them the best chance to hit him? Or they have to maybe change a little bit how they've been playing? Because they got to get this quarterback on the ground. If they let him stand back there and his jersey's clean in the fourth quarter, I don't think Georgia can win.
I agree with you to a certain extent, but Kirby is an old defensive back coach, and I watch them play if I get a chance to really concentrate. And there's nothing wrong with defending, but defending with great zone technique, and that can balance things out. Where a lot of these people, and it drives me up a tree. They line up and want to play man to man against Alabama. They're gonna beat you till the cops come home, till the cows come home. If you try to do that against them, but I think you got to pick a little bit whether you bring. Not an all-out blitz bear, but if you bring 5-man pressure, whether it's a extra linebacker you're putting in it, or you bring in a DB to create the 5-man, and you still can play zone behind it. So I just think that when you make him move around a little bit now, he's good enough with his feet, and he can throw off balance with the best of them that we've seen a long time. So. I agree with you to a certain extent, but you got to affect him mentally a little bit, and the physicality of hitting him, and that is always something that naturally quarterbacks they don't like, but it's going to be interesting now where he lines up and defends. But if you're going to defend with great zone technique, deeper than the deepest and underneath, breaking on the ball, and I think that's the way you play Alabama.
Yeah.
Curley, we found out through this whole season that Alabama's best offense is the pass, but we also know that Georgia's best offense is the run. Can Georgia block Alabama well enough to run the football, to keep the football, to make first downs, to shorten the game? I think they have a chance to do that. I'm not sure, but I guess that's the reason I ask you the question. Can they? They've got a darn good running game. Can they do that? And will they do it that way?
I think they've got a chance, because if you've really got a good running game, and they've got two of them now that can hammer it at you. And like I said, I think they're getting better. And then when you do that, if you're having any success in great play action passes, and they got a quarterback that can throw it. And I'm curious of what that other quarterback at Georgia, how much they're going to increase. Now, heck, I can't think of his name, but I know he's a talent, a freshman. But
Fields.
What package do they have for that athlete? And so I think that they pound it, play action passes, and I promise you, Kirby and them will overemphasize all the little things in the kicking game this week. Those Georgia players will know that Alabama's been very suspect in the overall kicking game, and it'll come down to naturally the turnovers and stupid penalties, big penalties I call them, and ball possession. Because if you keep it away from Alabama, and you got a chance. If you don't keep it away from that offense, you don't have a chance.
Curly, we've had people call and want to know, why do these coaches have such big contracts and long contracts, big money? And we try to tell them, hey, on the front end, everybody's loving everybody. You got to get all your money on the front end, because if you look at Auburn last year, if they win the SEC championship game, they're in the Final Four. All of a sudden, fast forward 365 days, it's not even 365, and they're talking about Gus Malzahn can't do this, he can't do that, let's buy him out. Boy, how difficult is that as a head coach, the ebb and flow of a season where they're loving you one day, they're hating you the next. You just got to block out all that outside noise. But that's why these contracts, Arkansas came after him. So Auburn countered. I don't blame Gus Malzahn as agent. I'd get as much money as I can, because once it goes south a little bit, everybody's turning on you. So you got to have your money there in place to protect you.
That's the popularity of the sport this day and age. If you riding high, you're the greatest thing since double bubble was invented. And but I really think, going back to the Auburn situation, he's fine. If they're so next year, the big Auburn money people, they'll get involved. But right now, he's fine. But I think Gus, I don't think you'll ever see him play again without having an athletic, talented quarterback, meaning a guy that can move his feet, run. Well, it doesn't make any difference if he can run like Tua and Kyler Murray from Oklahoma. First off, there's not many that can run like those two, especially Murray. But he will have him an athletic quarterback that can throw it and run it, and that's his offense. And I don't think he's ever going to get away from that concept. So he's going to be fine if he gets him an athletic quarterback. But the popularity this day and age, money people involved in your program, they feel like they kind of the CEO, several of them, and they're going to always voice themselves, and they're going to have an input because they have money. And they'll affect what that athletic director wants to do and what that president wants to do.
Why is it that people that have all the money don't have a lot of patience? Why is that, Curly?
Well, a lot of those rich folks now got big egos. And like I said, this is my team, kind of like the NFL. This is my team.
They change coaches like they change wives, those really rich people there. All right,
let me ask y'all for the people out there, because a lot of people think the Heisman race is over, and I don't see it that way. You know, I try to still study the game a little bit, but I think it is a 2-horse race, dead heat going into the last game that's going to decide who wins the national championship. What do y'all feel about that?
I feel like Friday night, I think Murray made a lot of progress. Everybody watched him. He drove them down the field every time he needed to. And so I think he maybe evened it at that point. And then I think when Tua went out and threw for 5 touchdowns and ran for another one, he separated himself again. I don't know that they even be close. I think Tua's won the Heisman unless he just completely falls on his face. I guess maybe they remember the last thing that you say. Dad, what's your take on it?
I'm a little bit in between both of you guys. I think it's going to be a little bit closer than you think. And I don't know that I think Tua's ahead, but I think it's going to be a little bit closer than Alabama people think. But I think Tua will win it in a close race.
I think it'll be one of the closest votings we've had in a long time. If you take out, this is something very few people have researched and know anything about it. If you take out Kyler Murray's fourth quarter stats, just take them out, eliminate them. In other words, just give his stats for the first 3 quarters. They are so close, it's unbelievable. And what Murray has to do for his football team, can you imagine every time he goes on the field, he says, hey, we got to get points. And their defense is awful, but at the same time, he does so much for his football team. I don't tell you what kind of athlete he is. A gentleman the other day, he said, well, he won't be playing in the NFL. I said, I 100% he won't be playing in the NFL, because he was the 8th overall pick in the last baseball draft. You'll see him again, but it's going to be playing center field, stealing bases and hitting. But I hope it some way, if Oklahoma could get in, and Alabama and Oklahoma play, from my point of view, to see these 2 kids play against each other, because they are as special as we've seen in a long time.
Yeah, that receiving core that Judy, Ruggs, Smith, and Waddell, guess what? They're all back again next year. Wow, what a group.
Is the tight end back?
I think he could go. I need to look at it. Irv Smith, James, is he a junior? I believe he can go. But those other 4 guys are all either freshmen or sophomores, and 2 obviously is back as well. So, and
you got two running backs that we don't talk a lot about. Najee Harris and the Robinson kid, Tuscaloosa. He's a 220-pounder that we will see play in the NFL someday, and he's 14.